Is the Bank of International Settlements getting any closer to making XRP a Tier 1 asset for banks? Jake Claver joins in, and I've done a lot of study on this subject so you can finally know what's going on behind the scenes. When you're done with this movie, you'll really understand where we're going with XRP, who really has the power, and whether a Tier 1 asset designation is actually possible. Let's start right away. Chris is first. He wants to know if there is a way for politics to get in the way of XRP's price growth once it has been properly accepted. That's a great question because it makes you think about who would be in charge of putting XRP into use around the world. This is where things get really real, because there is one name that always comes up when you ask who controls the global banking system and can make choices without being influenced by politics. It is called the Bank of International Settlements. The BIS is the most important judge. The central bank of central banks is a sovereign body that doesn't have to answer to anyone. It's over when they call. That is the norm. That's the set of rules. That is the new system that runs the world's banking system. So when Jake says every central bank will listen as soon as the BIS makes that designation, he means it. Everyone lines up, nothing is pushed or lobbied for, and there is no back and forth. If the BIS says that XRP is the neutral asset, the payment asset, the liquidity layer, and the way for value to be moved around the world, then the deal is done. That is the game. The IMF, the UN, the G20, and every country's central bank all do what they're told. That's where the huge desire comes in. Before you can understand what's being talked about, you need to know that list. The best reserves that a bank can hold are Tier 1 assets. Some of these are core stock, high-quality government bonds, sovereign debt, physical allocated gold, and cash reserves. That's it. The world's banks see these assets as the safest, most liquid, and most stable reserves on the planet. Gold, cash, government bonds, and top-level stock, that's the club. At this time, the BIS has not named XRP as a Tier 1 currency. But you can't stop there. You need to look at the building, the rules, and the way the BIS is going. The BIS has made it clear that something must be liquid, steady, reliable, and able to handle risk in order to be Tier 1. It needs to work all over the world. It needs to be able to work across countries. It needs to become part of the world settlement layer. This is where the story gets interesting. Physical gold was recently renamed as a Tier 1 asset because it can settle anywhere in the world and is always liquid. If you've even just learned a little about XRP, you already know what this means. If the BIS ever decides that digital settlement assets, digital liquidity layers, bridge assets, or compatible neutral networks are important building blocks, then XRP is the best digital asset product to meet those needs, as the BIS is not only interested in payment. Interoperability, liquidity, messages, and harmonization across borders are some of the things they are looking at. The global financial layer is not being built for the next 10 years, but for the next 100 years. At the moment, the BIS sorts digital assets that aren't saved up. As Group 2 assets, there are XRP, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more. Banks can only hold a certain amount of them compared to their Tier 1 capital, but the way they are classified is based on old rules, not how the systems will work together in the future. This is where the work of the BIS starts to show what's to come. Over the past few years, the BIS has put out papers, frameworks, and trial programs on how to use tokenized systems, unified ledgers, and interoperable messaging layers to make cross-border settlement more unified. Interoperability, liquidity efficiency, neutral third-party assets, and programmable settlement levels are all things that are talked about over and over again. What community for digital assets has spent more than 10 years building this? You can use Ripple, XRP, ILP, ODL, Ripplet, and ISO-aligned messages. Things aren't hard. When you zoom out, the line is clear. Listen to how the BIS talks about the 3 levels of connectivity they're working with to get this even more clear. First, there is the technical part, which is making sure that different systems can communicate, share value, and work together across networks. A lot of money is going into this layer from the business. ILP, or Interledger Protocol from Ripple, is truly meant to be the universal link between systems that speak different languages. Liquidity is the second layer. This is the real source of pain. A neutral payment asset is needed when 2 currencies don't have a market that works well with each other and has a lot of cash on hand. Something in the middle, something that can handle billions of dollars in transactions across areas where liquidity doesn't normally arise. This is exactly why XRP was made, to have a lot of traders. Instant settlement, neutral placement, global routing, and market making that is done automatically. Ripple has been working on this for years. The third level is policy agreement between countries. This is the hardest part because it has to do with AML, KYC, privacy rules, data standards, payment approvals, and rules and regulations from more than 100 countries. That's why a neutral asset is important. A neutral settlement bridge is used by countries that don't agree on each other's rules to avoid a fight. That's the whole point. A neutral digital asset acts as a middle ground, letting transactions go through quickly without making countries follow each other's rules. In the end, this is what a Tier 1 city layer will look like. This is the reason the BIS keeps talking about unified systems, shared ledgers, CBDC interoperability, and working together in a way that is both public and private. This is why Ripple's role is more important than most people think. When we talk about Ripple, take a look at the team of people who work on it. Along with the Bank of International Settlements, Ripple has people on its team who have worked for the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve, the Department of Justice, the State Department, the White House, the FDIC, the Department of Defense, the IMF, SWIFT, the World Economic Forum, and even the FDIC. This isn't a project for stores. This is the building blocks. This is engineering and policy alignment at the world level. Bring your attention back to the BIS. The BIS is not a government. It is not a business. It's not a personal bank. It is a thing that has sovereign protection. It has its own police team. It is against the law for any national power to touch it, except in very small ways. It can send money around the world and privately keep assets. This is why the choices it makes are important. The BIS picks the standard, and it stays that way. This is why people are talking about Tier 1 rank and not just for fun. It's about structure. It has to do with how the city systems of the world are being rebuilt right now. The BIS has talked about systems many times that are similar to Ripple and XRP's architecture. The uniform ledger model has been brought up. Interoperability models have been brought up. They've made the point that cross-border payments need a neutral asset. In more than one paper, they looked at the interledger protocol. They have done trial projects with Ripple representatives. They tested how well CBDC can work with other systems by using technology similar to Ripple. All of these projects, Project Agora, Project Dunbar, Project Rosalind, and Project Helvetia, are moving in the same direction. A system for global payment that needs a neutral asset for liquidity. Who has been working on that longer than anyone else? XRP. Take a look at Project Agora. The BIS basically said that for payments to work in the future, there needs to be a single system that lets tokenized commercial bank deposits and tokenized wholesale central bank money work together. What's in the middle of those groups? A settlement train that is neutral, a bridge, a layer of fluid. ILP is sitting in models that show this as the connectivity layer. It was also at this time that Ripple joined the BIS task group on payments and market infrastructure, along with the player. They are one of the main people who are deciding where this is going. The BIS talks about how CBDCs can work with each other. Ripple is one of the most tried and true tools for CBDCs in the world. More than 130 countries are building CBDCs, and Ripple is working with many of them to make cross-currency payment possible. XRP is seen as the neutral asset, the bridge, the payment layer, the liquidity layer, and the value translator that can be used by anyone. And when global trade, debt, and real-world assets are all turned into tokens and CBDCs run on networks that can talk to each other, the bridge asset is the most important piece of the puzzle. The discussions, the paperwork, the pilots, the involvement in the task force, the need for liquidity, the difficulties across borders, the CBDC frameworks, and the BIS Unified Ledger Roadmap all point in the direction that XRP was made for. That's what most people miss. It takes time for banks to adopt a new system. First they watch, then they take part in pilots, then they test in secret, then they build around it, then they adopt it gradually, and finally the standard is set. The BIS is already making plans for how that standard will work. Ripple is already in the meetings where these standards are being made, and XRP is already being used as the liquidity engine for cross-border settlement across Ripple's network. The world's financial system is also moving toward tokenized assets, tokenized money, and digital payment layers that can work with each other. As you learn more about the BIS framework, it becomes clearer that the world's financial system is being rewired for a single, programmable, and interoperable settling layer. The BIS has said many times that the old system can't handle the global economy's size, speed, openness, complexity, and connectivity. They need a digital design that works like the Internet of Value. To do this, the settlement layer needs to be quick, efficient with liquidity, globally neutral, interoperable, programmable, accurate, and able to grow into the trillions without any problems. XRP is one of only a few systems that can say all of those things. The BIS doesn't do anything by accident. It's all part of a long-term plan, from the pilot to the framework to the discussion panels to the interoperability tests to the funding models. They use this method to coordinate actions around the world. They don't think in months, but decades. Right now, they're making plumbing that people will use for 100 years. That makes XRP's role much clearer when you zoom out. The idea of a unified ledger is the first part of the new system. The BIS wants a single space where tokenized CBDCs, tokenized bank accounts, tokenized real-world assets, and tokenized liquidity assets can all work together without any problems. There is more than one blockchain. It's not just one business. It is not just one network. It's an ecosystem that works together thanks to interoperability standards. Different networks, languages, platforms, and regulatory models are all brought together into one smooth layer by the ledger. And what is in the middle of this huge organizational problem? The bridge's value, the neutral money used for payment. This is the layer of liquidity that lets all systems quickly share value. That's exactly what XRP was made for. Ripple designed XRP from the start to be a fast, neutral, energy efficient, and credit agnostic settlement asset that can move freely across countries and networks. ILP was created to be a universal language translator for financial networks, able to connect systems that were never meant to talk to RippleNet ODL. Now, Ripplet are created to offer automated liquidity routing and real-time settlement across any currency pair, any corridor, and any CBDC system. These are not just chance events. These are the building blocks that fit the BIS plan almost perfectly. The BIS is aware that payments between countries are the weakest link in the world's financial system. It is slow, expensive, broken up, repetitive, useless, and full of cash that is stuck. It's been decades since they last looked into how to fix this. Additionally, adding another patch, update, or message format is not the answer. They need a whole new plan. The money is tokenized and runs on a single set of programmable, interoperable tracks. And for that to work, there needs to be a digital asset that acts as a neutral transaction link between all the systems. Ripple has been in a certain place for a decade for a reason. And it's not the way a company that's making a simple tool for accepting payments from customers should act. Instead, Ripple has consciously become a part of the same set of institutions that control global money policy, the way money moves around in the economy, and the rules for settling transactions across borders. The pattern is clear when you look at it closely. The BIS and Ripple have both worked with groups that the BIS itself often works with. In every major economic area, there are groups like the IMF, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, and central banks. There aren't any casual relationships or small talk going on here. They show where Ripple wants to work, which is at the center of the movement of value around the world. And the makeup of Ripple's internal leadership is also very important. People on their team have worked in the White House, the U.S. Treasury, the Federal Reserve, the Department of Justice, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Defense, SWIFT, the FDIC, and different central banks in the past. If you want to make another financial app that competes with PayPal or Venmo, you won't be able to hire people in that group. When your job requires you to work with the highest levels of global finance, navigate regulatory frameworks, and change the way money is stored, you attract people with that level of knowledge. This group has decades of experience in monetary policy, national security, overseeing payments, financial compliance, and bringing old banking systems up to date. This is the knowledge you need to work with national payment lines, liquidity networks, cross-border settlement layers, and the groups that write the rules for global finance. That's exactly why Ripple has been able to get in touch with central banks, join high-level working groups, and add to conversations about how to regulate digital assets and how to design the CBDC. To put it another way, Ripple is building infrastructure, not apps. All of the partnerships, hires, and placements move in the same direction, becoming part of the next generation of global financial infrastructure. To get ready for a future with tokens, banks all over the world are making plans. There are different types of tokenized securities, such as treasuries, swaps, trade finance, CBDCs, and cross-border settlement. Tokenizing value is the biggest change in finance since digital banking, and in a world where value is tokenized, payment must happen in real time. Tokenizing assets worth trillions of dollars and letting them get stuck in slow payment lines defeats the whole point. In other words, the world needs instant settlement lines which need instant liquidity. For instant liquidity, there needs to be a neutral, widely recognized settlement asset that works in real time. What's even more important is this. The BIS has made it clear that their new system needs a tough third asset to deal with cross-currency liquidity problems. They talked about how there needs to be a neutral asset that can work between tokenized payments, tokenized assets, and CBDCs. They have shown that the unified ledger model fails when there isn't enough cash on hand without this kind of asset. It's been years since XRP has been used in this way. It's real, not just an idea. As of now, XRP is used as a cash asset for cross-border settlement by banks, fintechs, money transfer services, payment providers, and other financial institutions. This is not advice about money. Adding this to the BIS's pilot programs, Project Rosalind looked into how APIs could be used to communicate and connect CBDCs, and Ripple's architecture fits perfectly with the goals of programmable liquidity. Project Dunbar, on the other hand, focused on multi-CBDC platforms for instant cross-border settlement, which again fits well with XRP's strengths. As part of Project Helvetia, tokenized assets and tokenized wholesale CBDCs were looked at as ways to connect them to real-time payment layers. The main goal of Project Agora is to create a single platform for both tokenized central bank money and tokenized private bank deposits. These projects aren't just sitting there, they're all making parts of the same structure. Each part needs to be able to work with other parts, be programmable, and have neutral settlement assets. Anything you follow in the building ends up at the same place. XRP fits the plan that the BIS is making for the future of the world. Bitcoin can't be used for this by banks. Bitcoin is slow, expensive, unstable, uses a lot of energy, and isn't really designed to be used for world settlement. This is not possible with Ethereum. Ethereum is only scalable with very complicated layered structures, and it still gets crowded when it's busy. It's not designed for settlements across borders. It's not possible for stablecoins to be the base. Stablecoins depend on assets and issuers that back them up, which can pose legal and credit risks. The BIS doesn't want assets to be linked to certain countries. They want things to be fair. They want an asset that isn't affected by politics at the national level. Something that isn't tied to any one government or central bank. XRP is one of the few options left, and it is at the top of the list. Let's talk about how the rules are aligned now. It is already known by institutions all over the world that XRP meets strict standards for messages and interoperability. It's lined up with ISO 2022. It's built into systems that were made to handle a lot of cash messages. Central banks have tried Ripple to see if it can work with CBDC, and the rules around XRP are becoming clearer around the world, which will make it much easier for banks to connect over time. Banks want assets that are easy to sell, controlled, predictable, technologically advanced, scalable, and recognized by groups that set global standards. These things are being done faster with XRP than with almost any other digital currency in the world. The goal of institutions is not to find hype or instability. Reliability, compliance, and technology are things they need. They can connect right to the financial lines that are already there. That's why Ripple has spent years making sure that the design, liquidity model, and regulatory clarity of XRP meet the needs of central banks, big banks, and payment providers. Ripple isn't trying to get small players to use its service. It's slowly but surely setting up the conditions needed for widespread institutional acceptance. That means making sure XRP can work within strict legal frameworks, showing enterprise-grade throughput, integrating with messaging standards like ISO 2022, and taking part in global working groups that decide the future of digital assets and cross-border payments. Ripple's plan is based on a long-term goal. XRP is being positioned as a payment asset that can work within the global financial system and not just on the edges of it. They're not in it for the money. They're in it for the big bucks, and everything they're making, from CBDC infrastructure to funding solutions, points to a digital asset that's designed for big, government-level financial transactions. Liquidity is another important part. The BIS has said that the new financial design will be built around making liquidity more efficient. Today, corridors that don't have enough cash cause bottlenecks, delays, slippage, and higher costs. For the BIS's unified ledger to work, It needs a settlement asset that can quickly connect markets that aren't liquid. XRP is perfect for this liquidity engine because it has an automated liquidity model, decentralized exchange methods, and the ability to get liquidity from global markets. In just seconds, ODL has shown that it can turn illiquid corridors into liquid ones. That isn't an idea, that's making something. Cross-currency settlement that can be programmed is what the BIS wants, and Ripple is already showing it off in live channels. Take a look at tokenized real-world goods now. It is important for the BIS to pay close attention to RWA tokenization because tokenized bonds, corporate debt, stocks, commodities, real estate, and other things are becoming more common in global finance. To keep collateral and cash from getting stuck, these assets need instantaneous settlement rails. These tokenized assets can move quickly and securely thanks to the way XRP is designed. As liquidity pools grow across tokenized ecosystems, XRP becomes the best root asset due to its speed, neutrality, and ability to be used anywhere in the world. That's not all. Swift also has strategic placement. Ripple has been careful not to present itself as a rival. On the contrary, they work with Swift to help it move faster, be more efficient, and add more modern technology. However, it becomes clearer as Ripple grows and as banks start to use real-time settling layers. Ripple is not going to replace Swift, but a neutral digital asset like XRP could become the engine that makes the global payment system work. Swift is like texting. XRP is money. Even though they do different things, XRP gives payment power that Swift never had. The BIS has also said many times that a shared settlement layer is needed for faster, customizable, multi-currency settlement. It's not often that assets are even talked about, but XRP is one of the few that can. The real question that everyone is asking isn't, will XRP become a Tier 1 asset tomorrow? The question is when the BIS needs to name a digital asset as a Tier 1 settlement asset in order to support the unified ledger. This choice will be made by the BIS when the system calls for it. It will be officialized by the BIS when CBDCs, tokenized accounts, and tokenized assets are fully integrated around the world. When that time comes, the asset that best meets the requirements is chosen as the payment asset. At the moment, XRP is the only thing that fits those conditions the best. The bridge asset will be the most important thing when the world's finances are tokenized, can work with each other, and are always on. This is where everything is going. Before the system is ready, the BIS won't say anything.